Alrighty. So part two, just letting me focus on, you're probably not going to see this part, but I'm just talking to myself at the moment. Okay, let's get set back up. Maybe you will. Who knows? I'm never sure about anything. I just start recording stuff. We'll see what happens. Maybe throw this reel in, but I was just putting air in my tire. So sometimes you got to do that stuff. You got to put air in your tires, make sure you're good to go. So we're talking about the Columbus Zoo. My family's starting to watch Secrets of the Zoo. And so what we start to do is we actually start to plan and put these things together. And as we start putting together, because my son and my wife had seen the show, and then I started watching the show, and my youngest son started watching the show, we were able to start formulating a plan. And so once we started formulating this plan, what became very obvious is that our kids really started wanting to give their opinion and make sure they saw certain animals and make sure they saw certain things, and which was really awesome. And one thing I started really noticing even more is that they just were so into this trip that made me feel like this is our trip now. This was not just me and my wife's trip, and that we're just putting a family trip together. Let me straighten that out a little more. There we go. And just, I think that's what was really awesome about the whole thing, is that we were able to do this as a family and have a really, it just felt really awesome because we were able to all come together and start agreeing on things. And so as we started putting this trip together, one thing we started talking about was, well, what are some of the things that, maybe me and my wife wanted to do? And so one thing is, I've always wanted to go to the NFL Football Hall of Fame. And for me, that was something I've always wanted to do. And I'm like, I'm going to be in Ohio. Like, how could I pass it up? And so that was one of the things I wanted to see. And then my wife was like, hey, I want to go see the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And so we put that on the list. We both like baseball. Actually, all four of us like baseball. So we went ahead and we thought, well, let's go see a Guardians-Indians game. Like, let's go check it out. And so that was definitely something that we started putting together. And so we started formulating this plan. And what started happening is that our kids really were like, yeah, let's do this, let's do that, let's do this, let's do that. And I tell you, what I started seeing was that we all were coming together and really loving how this trip was coming. And so when I tell you, let your children have a voice on a trip, you're going to see a difference. I mean, our kids, sometimes when we've gone on trips, our kids would be like, oh, do we really have to go there? Do we really have to do that? We've gotten that. But what was really amazing about this trip is that we were able to actually have our children feel like, no, this is our trip. Mommy and daddy might have put together like we're going to Ohio, but we're going to the zoo. We're going to the wilds. Like, we get to see. And so essentially what we did was we flew out into Columbus. We rented a car for the week. And then we essentially went, after we saw the zoo, we took a ride up to Cleveland. And in Cleveland, we went down to the beach. We took them over to a playground so they run around, which I want to pause at this moment because one thing we really learned from our Disney trip, excuse me, is that you don't have to pack everything in. When you're planning a trip, don't feel like you have to see every single solitary thing. Now, if it's you and another adult, you might get to like pack a lot of things in. But if you're going with children, you have to remember you're with children. And I think that is one of the biggest things I want to get across to you is that, remember, your kids are still kids. even if you're a parent who puts a lot on your children, I get it. I have some rules in our house. We set boundaries, we have things set up for our kids. But I also remember that there are children. And that's something I had to learn very quickly when we were at Disney World. I was thinking that my son, my youngest son at the time, he was young. And I was like, no, he could walk around because, we go hiking. I take my kids hiking. I do all these things with my kids. He should be able to do this. Well, my wife, who I will say has better ideas than me sometimes, and she said to me, hey, Shane, I get where you're coming from, but he's like 4 or 5 years old and he's not going to be able to do this. He hikes really well, and I know there's going to be a lot of parents who if they hear this, they're going to be like, he was only 4 or 5 years old, but he's been hiking since he was 2.5 years old. And I thought he could be okay. Well, that wasn't the fact. I totally messed that up. As an adult, as a man, I took a step back and I said, you're right. Let's do that. So we got a cart for him. Now, my older son, he's old enough. He can walk around for the day. Now, do I think both of my boys? Yeah, they can walk through a park for the day. But I think the thing is, what I had to also learn, and we had to learn as a family, is that we don't need to go to the park all day long. Let's go to the park. Let's figure out what we want to do. And then maybe go back to the pool and hang out. Maybe take a day at the pool. And so we had to learn those things. And so when we were on this trip, I felt like we were a little more relaxed because we weren't forcing everything. And look, we all make mistakes. As a parent, I make mistakes too. And I learned from those mistakes, and I say, okay, I get it. There's certain things I have to pull back on and make sure that, yes, my son can't walk all day in the park. Absolutely. At that time, he could not. My wife was right. And I will be man enough to say I was wrong. And so we learned from our mistakes and we tried to fix them. So let me get back to the story because I want to, bring this back together, and I'll close this out for you because I know we try to keep it at 15 minutes. So I'm going to try to bring it in. It might be a little bit longer today because I feel like this is just an important topic. And this topic is so important because if you want to have a really good trip and you're not listening to your children, you might have a really hard time. So that's where I want to point that out to. Now, let's get back to it. So back to Ohio. So because we took our time, we went to the zoo for the day, and then we went back and we relaxed. I believe we went to the pool, chilled out. Then we took, the next day, we drove up to, as I said, Cleveland, went down to the water, checked it out. They got to go on the playground. I put the seat back in the car, passed out for a few minutes. We really tried to make this trip more about focusing on the zoo and maybe 2 or 3 things. So we spent a couple days in Cleveland. One night we went to the baseball game, and then we went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which was really cool, really awesome. And while we were there, one thing I really did to make sure with our kids started getting a little bored. So I said, hey, why don't you come with me and we'll go walking around? Because my wife really wanted to take some time and look around, but she really wanted to look around the store and see, is there anything she really wanted? So I was like, boys, just come with me, hang out with me. So then we took our ride down to Canton to the NFL Football Hall of Fame. And while we were there, it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. And my boys at first really enjoyed it. There's one exhibit where they could put on pads. They can put their body inside a lay cast of a player. There was a lot of this one room. I think it's like a rotunda. It's just a big circle. And one of the things that was really great about that is that our kids were able to sit down, or not sit down, but be able to walk around and be a little more immersive and not feel like a little bit bored. But eventually they did get bored. And I wanted to spend time in the room where the heads are, the statues. And so that was something I really wanted to do. And so my wife was like, okay, go ahead. And I'm a big New York Giants fan. So my whole basement is painted blue, and I have New York Giant memorabilia all over the place. I've so for me, do I know a ton of the history? No, but I know some of the history. But I've just been a fan since I was a kid. I mean, ever since I don't know how young I was. Ever since I could remember, I have been a New York Giants fan. And so it was really awesome to walk around and see all the players that were in it, and then the other players I've watched over the years in the Hall of Fame. And so it was just really awesome. But my kids got bored, and totally understandable. They're kids. And that's where my wife was like, hey, boys, why don't you come with me? We'll go walk over here. Let's go check out the store. Let's see if there's anything you want. So I spent a little time up there, in this room while they they went downstairs, walked around, or I'm not sure if it was downstairs or upstairs. But ultimately, my wife took them, and so we played tag team like that. So then after that, we went down to the Wilds. And I have to just say, like, if you get the opportunity to go to the Wilds, it is awesome. Because what's really nice about this place is that the area is so open. It is so open for these animals, and they get to just roam around, feel like they're in almost like a natural habitat, but not really, because there are fences eventually. But we got on this little open air bus and we just drove around. My kids loved it. There was to a point animals were almost like right up next to the open air bus. It was totally awesome. But I believe this trip was incredible, and we still talk about this trip. And I think it was incredible because we let our children have a voice on this trip. And that's why this trip was awesome. And that's the biggest thing I want to get across to you today, is that the more you let your kids have a voice in the planning. Now, I get it. You want to build a foundation. You're saying, this is where we're going. This is what we're doing. I totally get that. I get that as a parent. It's fine. But let them help picking out the points of interest. I think that is the most important thing, because you will see the difference in these children, as I was talking earlier. And my boys, Bryce and Ty, they loved it. And I felt like that Ohio trip was just something we learned from other mistakes. Are there things we can work on? Sure, there absolutely. But I think that was one of the best trips we went on, because we were able to let them have a voice. So that's the ultimate thing I want to get to you today, is that let your children have a voice. Anyone who's on a trip, but definitely let your children have a voice on a trip. Let them help you pick the point of interest. Because if you do, you're going to have a great time, because the road's open. Let's drive.